are talking The Cradle of Shadows from 2015, or at least that is the English translation of this French horror movie. I should point out this movie I have seen advertised as a found footage movie. It isn't. It's a standard kind of filmed movie, but there are a couple of sequences that are found footage, but it's really like 5% of the movie. Don't go into this thinking you're watching a found footage movie. Anyway, what's the story? Well, it focuses on a group of paranormal researchers who team up with a private investigator who are hired to go and find like a missing worker in this kind of series of tunnels. So they go down there and we find out that these tunnels were actually used by the Nazis in World War II to do devious experiments. And our group of protagonists end up getting locked in these tunnels, and they're not alone, as there seems to be feral cannibals in there, possibly part of these kind of experiments by the Nazis. So what will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. So this is a lower budget movie, a French B movie, if you like. And obviously you can compare it to the likes of, like, you know, As Above, So Below, and I've also recently reviewed one, I think, called Deep Fear. I think this was also called Bunker 515, I believe. Similar kind of in concept. It's just not the Paris catacombs, I'll point out. What can we say that works in this movie's favour? Now, despite this clearly being a lower budget movie, you have got a pretty good kind of location with these kind of tunnels and things like that. I mean, it looks like they're relatively expansive and they could make good use of them within this kind of this movie. I don't know if I would say they look abandoned. We clearly see lots of kind of electric lights still kind of functioning okay, but they look, you know, decrepit to some degree, but I don't know if I would say they look abandoned. But nonetheless, it's a kind of a decent you know, setting, a decent location. It'll get you that kind of fear of kind of claustrophobia, and it's obviously they've made use of this this location. The story idea, I think, is solid, if not spectacular. Obviously, we have seen kind of similarities with this as well, and tying it into the Nazis, obviously being a French movie, I think is a good idea, and it gives it that kind of extra kind of you know, extra kind of layer to a certain degree. The movie is relatively kind of well shot for which is a clearly kind of low budget movie, particularly where it looks like a lot of it was kind of filmed on kind of location. You know, it looks suitably dark when it's meant to be dark, but you can kind of see what's going on. So it's relatively kind of like well lit here and there. And you know, the idea, like I say, it's okay. But I think this movie really suffers from lack of ambition to a certain degree. One of the things I think was the biggest frustrations for me is the kind of the lack of willingness to kind of show us anything what's going on. This movie uses a few techniques to kind of like not show us the beings that are down there. It might kind of flick to found footage mode when we see an attack happen, and you'll just get a load of shaky cam, or it will kind of cut away, or it will, you know, you'll just see someone's reaction and things like that. And it's just like, it does it a little bit too much. In fact, it does it pretty much all the time. In actual fact, I think this movie really overdoes it in the fact that you really don't see much in the way of our antagonistic forces, because it's constantly kind of finding an excuse not to kind of show you them. When we do get a glimpse, I have to be honest with you, I wouldn't say they're particularly impressive. It kind of looks like people with wigs on, if you want my honest opinion. There's one which is presented that might be a kind of ghost, but it doesn't really appear that's the case. So, you know, the idea is, I think, reasonable, but the execution is poor. But it doesn't just extend to the antagonists. I always say when I'm reviewing foreign language movies, sometimes the acting is hard to judge because you don't quite know the exact translation or how the kind of the emotional inflections might kind of appear in a kind of a foreign language movie. But I have to be honest with you, the acting here even though I don't understand French, I'm reading the subtitles, it didn't appear all that good. I'm not gonna lie. It kind of seems like a little bit of cheesy acting, certainly in regards to the kind of the physical performances, and the kind of like the facial expressions, things like this, the body language. I wasn't really kind of buying it. It all looked a bit kind of hokey, if I'm honest. The characters, I think, are a little ill-defined. The movie doesn't spend too long before we get into the tunnels, so we don't get a huge amount of kind of like of knowledge about our kind of characters. Yes, the typical one, the professor's having the affair with a pretty blonde girl, etc. But we don't get loads, and it just wants to get in these tunnels. But when we do get in the tunnels, a lot of it is just kind of walking around with the occasional kind of argument. I don't know, it's not the most thrilling, if we're being honest. The movie also has this feel of like a sitcom, well, maybe not a sitcom, but like a kind of a daytime drama. There's a couple of gore shots in it, but outside of them, you know, it has this sort of the way it's filmed. Although it's, you know, like I said, the lighting I think is competent and stuff, and the editing is fine. But it just has this kind of like look of like daytime drama that you'll kind of see on TV. Maybe because it's a French film, I don't know, just the equipment that we're using for what have you. But there's a little bit like, they use like fade outs a little bit and things like this. And there's just a couple of like, it looks like it's almost going to a commercial break at times. We sort of see, you know, it builds up to something and then it, you know, it cuts away and we have a different scene. Or it fades out like we're going to some sort of commercial break or something like that. So it just kind of feels like you're watching like the Halloween episode of some type of daytime sort of drama, if that makes sense. Just in the presentation of how this movie is portrayed. And it's got a kind of twist, but I feel it was a little silly. I didn't really think it made a huge amount of sense, if I'm honest. Again, I'm not going to spoil that for you. So overall, I have to be honest with you, this one was a little bit of a miss. I think the idea was solid, if not particularly original, but the execution of this film, I think it missed on quite a few levels. There's nothing really here, I think, to keep you too invested. I mean, you can, for me, I can be a sort of little forgiving with the lack of budget, the lack of like VFX and things. You can still tell an interesting story, you can still have interesting characters, you can still have elements that will keep you engaged, but it didn't really have any of that, to be honest. So I'll give this one a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? Please do let me know if you have and what your thoughts are, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.